Hey, are we on? Hi, everybody. It's Leslie here, Leslie the Little Plastic, and my friend Gnome, and Zazoo Plazz, and my little friend here, Mr. Frog. Look at him. He's so cute. Put him back over there. My little friend, the spring gnome. It's still Easter week, but yeah, it's the first, let's see, second Sunday of Easter, Divine Mercy Sunday. Oh, wow. What a week. So yeah, Taurus new moon is today. I don't know. Don't. Today's the 28th, April 28th, 2025. Zazoo Plazz report. And just take a moment. Okay. been been taking in all this energy and the spring. The azalea bush outside my window is blooming, and I can look out the blinds in my bedroom and see the little bees flitting from flower to flower. It's so cute. So I thought I'd wear my shirt today, my Jamaica video in this shirt. Get it? Jamaica video. Jamaica. Oh, I just made a salmon pie yesterday. I'm really shaking things up because from as long as I can remember, um, my mother would and my grandmother, they'd always make the salmon pies for Good Friday. But now that I'm shaking stuff up, now that I'm a grown up and nobody cares except me, I even used to make it on Good Friday when the kids were growing up. And then I got to the point where I said, I, I'm living by myself here. And I said, Easter, there was so much going on, and I couldn't, I was on a different sleep schedule. I said, you know what? Who says I have to make it on Good Friday? So, because I was going to my dad's to eat Easter, and it just didn't work out. And yeah, I just couldn't bring myself to order the salmon pie stuff um, to make for Easter. And I was just tired. I just needed a rest from all the rushing. And what I found was that I decided, oh, gotta show the socks. Didn't say Patty's ones, but that's okay. They match. I just got to the point. Maybe you can relate to this, where I said, you know what? The heck, screw doing everything the way my mother did. Screw the way I'm supposed to do things. I'm going to do things when my body feels like it, when I feel like it, when I get that yeah feeling, which if you study human design, this is me, emotional manifesting generator. I have to wait till I get a yeah, which is how I pick my songs and this, how I do my Zazoo report. I you know, I look at the readings and then I wait for a couple of words to jump out at me in the scripture. And this is how I channel. This is how I've come to realize how I get messages, through, scripture, through ancient texts. It doesn't have to be the Bible. It can be, I read a lot of things. But words jump out at me and then I get the music to it. It's kind of like writing a song, only I sort of channel, words and music that already exist, and then I smush everything together and serve you soup. But this is how I pick up, the energies that are here. It's my way of creating, through my writing, through my life. I am my creation. You know? My life is my creation. It's not one particular thing, it's everything. So I serve you soup every week or stew or whatever it is. And I hope that you, go away nourished, feeling uplifted, feeling motivated, feeling inspired, feeling like taking a trip, feeling like going and looking at beautiful things and filling your soul, expressing joy. Pass it on. Spring. Anyway, uh, birds are going nuts. They're all over the place. Anyway, um, so yeah, cinnamon pie. Yeah, so yeah, Taurus new moon. So it's a good time. I'm going to write out my new moon intentions. It's a good time to start, you know, things. But Taurus is kind of slow and methodical, So it's not going to feel like vroom, It's going to feel more like picture a bull walking through you know, a field or something, walking down the path. Bull. My dad's a Taurus. They're not in a big hurry. And if you try to stop them, they'll run over you. So you don't try to do that. You just kind of let them go. Plod along in their earthy way. It's fixed earth. It's not a lot that's going to happen quickly with that kind of energy. As long, especially with the sun, there's other aspects, of course. But, you know, Taurus is very, you know, it's like my dad. My dad's birthday was last week. He was 88. Yeah, that doesn't seem right because he's so young. Like, he's still dad. He's a new age he hasn't been before. So he inspires me that way. I think of life that way because that's what my dad has blessed me with, this eternally youthful perspective on life. He says he gets up and he says so many things he wants to do. That's the side of me that, well, I'm stubborn. I get that from my dad. And yeah, I get up every day and there's so much I want to do. There's barely, but I feel like there's enough time, you know, where he is always very impatient. He was very, always, when I was growing up. Not the kind of dad who, if, you wanted to see, not the kind of dad to sit down with me and, for a long time and talk or anything like that. He was always moving, always doing something, planting something, mowing things, washing the cars, going here, going there, going to work, meeting this one, meeting that friends. He and my mom were. But most of the things he was doing were, earthy kind of things, like, you know, going to work and making money. For him, he has to, now this all ties together, folks, don't worry. Um, and I think of my dad, although he's a man of faith, devout Catholic all these years, you know, he's not, I'm a Scorpio. I love to delve deep into topics. I love to just, you know, talk about those, you know, uh, forbidden things, right? And he's a Taurus. He doesn't want to go, but he's got his moon in Scorpio. So now that mom is gone, I've had some interesting, more, you know, philosophical discussions with him. Stories have come out, things that he's never told me before. He's coming around to share with me, and those discussions are really interesting because that's what I always needed from him. But he was always off doing something, so he was kind of, he'd come around and he would be the parent who would play. You know, um, we had a pool in the backyard. He'd sort of submerge and then he'd pop up and scare the crap out of me and pretend to be like you know, like a sea monster or something. He'd put the candy corns in his teeth, like a vampire, like that. Or he'd put like the orange peels in his mouth, and smile. And my mother would roll her eyes. He was a total kid, responsible adult, but still a kid. He'd introduced me to Benny Hill. I have my dad to blame for my playful sense of humor, just, enjoying the finer things. He has this way of like, you know, it's never good enough, right? He's never satisfied, my dad. Whatever he gets, somebody else has something better. Anyway, enough about my dad. But anyway, happy birthday to him. Uh, yeah, and I realized, okay, talking about that, yeah, my former spouse is selling his parents' house. So he's putting it on the market. He cleaned it all up, and that was a lot of work. That was a lot of work. I think it's still a work in progress, but he's come a long way with that. Um, yeah, so we had a lot of he grew up in that house. We're Gen X folks. His parents stayed in their house all these years since 1964. My parents were in their house in 63. My dad's still living in it. You know, so many stories, and it's tough to close up your childhood home. It's part of you is in that house. To imagine somebody else living there is, you know, it's uh, it's hard. It's just it. It's not an easy thing to do to part with those memories and things like that. I know because my parents sold our beach house, and just going there, I got very choked up and almost in a little peed off too. Watching those people in my house. What are they doing in our house? I had to leave. Anyway, um, yeah, and I was thinking today, it was 25 years ago, this month in May, that he and I were married 5 years. I was pregnant with our first son, BP, and 5 months pregnant. So we decided to go out to Las Vegas. So I posted, looking at some pictures of us. That was a great trip. But we went out to the Grand Canyon too and hiked around when we were out there. That was fun. And the Hoover Dam. So, okay, get to it, Zazoo. Okay, I needed to warm up. Second Sunday of Easter, Divine Mercy. So there's that. That's we talks about the Acts of the Apostles. So there's the apostles, right? Jesus is risen, but they're hiding. Um, Acts of the Apostles says many signs and wonders were done. Um, you know, at the hands of the apostles. And there were people just, Peter would walk by and people would, put sick people out so that his shadow would fall upon them. And, you know, and they were cured. But they were seeing, they were seeing the apostles. So that's the whole thing is, imagine, um, you know, the whole the whole theme of people who were there at the time of when Jesus rose and the apostles were around many years after his death and resurrection, and the people who believe and have never just believing by hearing the word, hearing about it, right? So there's that apostle, that one apostle, he was didn't he wasn't there, and that's this week, the doubting one, the one. Yeah. So, but these people, it's kind of like our times today. Um, as more people, are drawn to a greater consciousness, a greater evolution of their soul, right? The more people are added every day. It said that these people, they would see the signs of the apostles and they were drawn to it. They saw something that opened their eyes and made them see life in a different way. And you know, somebody's getting Amazon, whatever. So you can't, whatever. So there's an increasing consciousness, right? And a spread, it sort of spreads like wildfire. Then the psalm says, "Give thanks to the Lord, for He is good. His love is everlasting." Um, it's a joyful shouts of victory in the tents of the just. Um, so, in other words, talking about getting your strength in the Lord, right? Um, how we can be moving through life, and no matter what happens, we feel like we have that earthy security, like Taurus, you know, in our personal experience of spirit, of source, right? And that is what gets you going, is your personal. It's not what somebody else says that God is. It's your personal experience um, of God, like what God expressing through you in the world. That's what you need to bring out. It's not watching somebody else get healed. So it's not going to be like that because you're different, right? And your creations at different times in your life are going to be different because you're different. It's another theme for today. How critics, music critics, or whoever, will look at an artist and say, "Oh, you and your stars." No, that album wasn't as good as the last one. It wasn't the same as the last. Of course not. Nothing stays the same. Everything is meant to evolve. If you go around judging people because for their creation, they're creating. What have you done lately? It's just like, you know, I can never criticize someone's creations. Crapping all over their dreams. That's terrible. Compare things. Yeah, well, this is, to say, well, now this artist is doing this type of work, and this other, work that they did before was like this, but, you know, this is good for these reasons, and it shows this about them now versus this about them then. That's okay, you know. But to say something is better or worse than something, well, you can't make those judgments, because you just can't, because you're too limited, and that says more about the critic than it says about the work. So anyway, okay, Zazoo, rant over. Okay, so this is important now. This is the meat of the stuff. Book of Revelations, right? It's that apocalyptic book in the Bible, in the New Testament. So it was sort of channeled, written down by John the Apostle, the beloved one, um, who was a theologian. He was the youngest of the apostles. So he said he was on this Greek island, Patmos, and it's not clear whether he was exiled, in Roman prison there, or whether he was just sent to live there for a while. But he found himself there, and he was, in this cave, and through spirit, he was given this. Book of Revelations. And this voice said, "Write what you see." And then he saw a vision, what he knew to be Jesus later. But, and he fell down, and he said one like, there were gold lampstands and the Son of Man in the middle in a robe with a gold sash. You know, and Jesus said, "Don't be afraid. I am the first and the last, and living forever. And I hold the keys to death and the nether world," and is what he said. So, this is important because the place where John the Apostle, this island, it became a sacred place, UNESCO or something, uh, on the island of Patmos, which is, yeah, people make pilgrimages there. Okay, so that's important, ties into the song of the week. So then there's the Gospel of John, chapter 20, with doubting Thomas, where Jesus appears to the other apostles, where they're afraid, they're all locked, in this room, for fear of the authorities, Jewish authorities. And Jesus appears to them and says, "Peace be with you," and he shows them his, the marks in his hands and his side. And he breathed on them. He said that, sins, if you hold, people's sins forgiven, they will be forgiven. If you don't, they won't. And this kind of made me think. Now, these are just my thoughts, folks. I'm not trying to convert anybody or influence anybody. These are just my little reflections. Take it or leave it, um, as I go along. But it seems to me that's kind of like the karma, right? How we can, through the breath through our heart and expanding our heart space, we can go in and, ourselves, we can break karmic ties with people, right? You heard, if you're at all into energy healing and in all this woo woo stuff, you know that it's possible to break karmic ties with somebody from another life, from this life, or whatever. And then I think, the more I think about it, it's this sins forgiven thing. It's like setting yourself free. it's forgiving others' sins. If somebody does something to you, um, it hurts you, like carrying it around. And if you let that go, uh, then it's kind of like you free yourself. And so that's how this whole sacrament of reconciliation. But you don't need. The more I realize is that you don't need an external person to forgive you through. We can do that ourselves. Don't tell anybody. Anyway, that's just my thinking right now. It sits better with me than this whole sin thing and some guy sitting in the room telling you you're forgiven. Does he know? You know. Your soul knows. Anyway, so that's my thinking on that. Um, and then Thomas wasn't there. The next time he was there, and Jesus appeared to him, and he knew he was Jesus. But he said, "Blessed are those who, have not seen and believe." So, maybe Thomas was a tourist. I'm thinking maybe he just needs to, some people need to touch things to see that they're real. Other people can sense, they don't need to see or feel or have tangible. They have, they can see the unseen, right? Some people are gifted that way. Um, so, like John channeling, certain people are open to it and certain people are not open to it. And that's got to be frustrating for God that when he's trying to get through to you and you're just occupied with things, of the world, right? Taurus is very much about things of this world, nice going, working for the things of the world that are going to, I mean, they'll come to nothing. But that's another whole video. Um, anyway, uh, but there's power in words. So if you can go into your heart space and you open yourself up. Like I said, that's mercy for other people, for people being human, people making mistakes. That's important. Um, you know, you can read these words and summon that energy. Um, Open your heart, and forgiveness removes those blocks to healing and personal growth. So, but we can do that ourselves. Jesus was trying to tell us that. And words are very powerful. You can, use words to heal, and forgive people. You can do it without even being in the same room with them. Jesus was trying to tell people all these things, and then it's kind of like a game of telephone. It kind of got passed around and somebody said, oh, maybe maybe he meant this and let's go off and, tell people it's this. Well, not quite. Anyway. So then I started thinking, okay, for the song of the week, finally she's getting to it. Okay, so I started thinking, John the Apostle. What I was thinking is that whole thing about his monastery being on sacred ground, and it's actually a song by Yanni, whose name means John in Greek. You can't make this stuff up. And so literally John means God is gracious or good, which is kind of like merciful, right? God is gracious. Gives us his grace, right? So yeah, Yanni, real big in the 80s. I mean, and into the 90s. He's the new age composer and singer and pianist and musician. I guess he lives in Florida, but through the 80s and 90s, he had, you know, his albums and songs were like at the top of the charts, and he had these like really, what the heck is going on? The beeping. He had these, video concerts and like, at the Acropolis and these big productions and it's larger than life kind of, wow, Yanni, the romantic, all women looking at Yanni with his dark long hair blowing in the wind, with the mustache and the whole Greek god image, that was Yanni. So, um, yeah, but, you know, so that's where I'm going today. He had a song called On Sacred Ground, where thought and creation become one. It's on I'm going to, post the link and everything. Um, and some of the words were about go within your soul and on sacred ground. Creation's song is alive with sound. Let your light come shining, fly on. It's beautiful. The lyrics. I'll post the song. But that was from his 10th album. Um, his 10th album, uh, released October of 2000. What was the name of the album? I didn't write it down. Okay. It's his 10th album. So it got to number one on the Billboard New Age chart and 20 in the Billboard 200, I guess, for New Age for the year. The album, that this is on. Yeah, so I started thinking, yeah, that's perfect because, Yanni is from an island in Greece called, or not an island, it's a city or a place called Kalamata, like the olives, which has the Church of the Holy Apostles in it. And, and John the Apostle was on an island, the island of Patmos in Greece, that has sacred ground. And he was an apostle. So, I tied all these things together. There was that psalm. It says, I was hard pressed and falling, but the Lord helped me. Now, Yanni had this magnificent tour for his 1997 album, Tribute, right? To July 98, he finished up, 97, 98. He was exhausted. So he was in a period of decline in his life and his career, and he separated from Linda Evans, the actress. And he was living in the U.S., but he just dropped out, just put his career on hold, went home for 3 months and lived with his parents in Greece and traveled. And then in 99, he said he was watching a sunrise and he felt ready to go back. He felt like he had enough time. So he went back to Florida and started on a new album. And he told people, just leave me alone. If you see me, just say hello, but leave me the heck alone. I'm writing. So he wrote a new album. And then the critics came back with, some people said, he really is a true global artist. And then, but it's this new period of, this new album and this new way of writing was different from his stuff before. It wasn't as romantic, it was scaled back. Um, uh, some people said it was sparse or frail. I mean, but then there were those who said that it really was underrated because it showed tremendous personal growth and direction in his life. So, that I thought was really interesting because you can't let the critics, like the critics, they went after the apostles too. I mean, they were so afraid of, having been associated with Jesus, they went into hiding, kind of like Yanni, they felt like they had been through this they were exhausted. They had been through this personal ordeal. Their friend, right? They're separated from their friend. Uh, he he was killed in a very violent, awful way, and then he rose, appeared to them. Can you imagine what's going on with these apostles? They're just fishermen. They're just regular guys, and all of a sudden, God's like, "Hey, I got a job for you," and then they're all of a sudden all these things are appearing to them. They're having all these visions and all this. It's kind of like when you're going and you're creating something, right? Like Yanni, right? And that's what they were doing. They were starting their mission, their vocation. I'm going to get shut off and then I'll come right back. Let me off. Back. Yes, I'm back. Just for a couple minutes. Okay. All right. I'm back. 4 seconds. Okay. Just quickly. Um, yeah. So, I just want to finish saying, we can learn a lot from um, creative people, because I think and it doesn't matter what you do, whether you're an artist, a writer, a singer, musician. There's so many ways of, a comedian, an actor, actress, um, just, whatever medium you use, sculptor, whatever. You know, you could even be a landscape architect and, express yourself through plants, this time of year. Um, a chef, a cook, you make things in the kitchen. It can even just be, how you present yourself in the world and what kind of a friend you are, how you greet people. This is certain energy that you show up as in the world, right? Those are all different ways that we can be creative. And so it's not enough just to channel things through or just to receive um, you know these ideas. You have to, I'm finding, you got to put them out into the world and give them shape, give them form, right? And that is what heals, and that is what you know makes a difference. um, Kind of like, the Thomases of the world will see these things and they'll believe, right? Just uh, you know in a way, Thomas was representing, people who are very much in the world, of the world, and they need proof of things, you know. So yeah, so that's not to say Thomas was a bad person. No, it's just that he was used as an example um, by Jesus after he rose, to make the statement that, blessed are those who will come after and will not have been witnessed. Well, that's a first. I got kicked out 3 times. I'm just going to wrap it up now. Hopefully, it'll all come together. Boy, they really wanted to shut me off today. Okay, so yeah, that's all I have to say this week. Um, so I'm gonna go and have my paleo hot chocolate and my cashew butter rice cake. But I mean, I always have more to say, but it'll have to wait for next week. Go listen to some Yanni and relax. So yeah, this week we're taking a break from the heavy metal and the grunge and the alternative. So go relax and listen to some Yanni. Feel good. Enjoy the springtime. And oh, it's my half birthday next week. That's nice. And Beltane, I guess the start of May. I don't know. So anyway, I'll see you next week. Have a great week. Enjoy. And I'll see you next week. Same place, different time. Take care.